Me first? Okay.
Sure, I guess.
Yeah, so I am Tearra Oso. I am a multidisciplinary artist. I grew up doing traditional bomba. So it's really the enslaved West African people that were brought to Puerto Rico. They brought their West African rhythms, and then they were forced to sing in Spanish because their colonizers were Spanish. And they sang together and they danced together and they sang about things that were going on in the world and in their world. And so I was like, wow, we're going through such a hard time right now. It would be really beautiful to use these rhythms and like do the same kind of thing that they were doing, but right now. So that's what I did for my project. And I was a cohort of the 10th year of the Cedar Commission. So
Cool.
Super fun. And I was telling some folks here, it's like so beautiful to have grants like this, to be inspired and to think about like, how am I going to make such an impact that they're going to pick my project to do it? And then I want to make everybody proud. So like, it just helps you build yourself up and makes you want to work harder. It's really cool.
Cool. Thanks, Tearra. My name is Robert Lehman. I've been lucky enough to lead the Cedar Commissions for the last 2 years. I did it the year before under the guidance of Alana Horton. Some of you may know Alana as a member of the music community here. I've been at the Cedar the last 3.5 years in a couple different roles. I was in like marketing and then booking, and then did some video editing, and then now I help manage grant funded programs and community programming. So yeah, it feels like we're kind of settling into a little more stable of a zone. So it's been a little hectic over the last 2 years. In the session, we'll go over an overview of what the Cedar Commissions are, what artists do, what artists receive, who's eligible for it. We'll take a brief question break in the middle, and then we'll do an overview of the application at the end. I'll talk a little bit about different things that make for a strong application. And at the end, we'll do a final Q&A. Cool. All right. So just the mission of the Cedar. The mission of the Cedar is to promote intercultural appreciation and understanding through the presentation of global music and dance. There are 4 bullet points under the mission. We're committed to artistic excellence and integrity, diversity of programming, community outreach, and then support for emerging artists. Support for emerging artists is really where the Cedar Commissions comes in. We're working on some other artist programs as well. I want to talk with some of the folks here about like what you think might be helpful. I think we're going to get started with some more artist community programming. So what are the Cedar Commissions? They used to be called the 416 Commissions. Some people might remember them as that. That was like a month-long or month-and-a-half long series where each artist would have like a Monday night in the wintertime. And that was like back when I think Dessa did it and Abby Wolf. That was like the really early years of it. And now it's evolved to like 3 performers for one of the weekends in February. There'll be 3 performers per night. This program commissions 6 early career emerging Minnesotan artists. So people can be from like outside of the Twin Cities. We haven't had too many applicants from outside of the Twin Cities, but sometimes people will apply from like Bemidji or St. Cloud or Mankato, stuff like that. The idea is that you create brand new music and you perform it on the Cedar stage in the early winter time, I guess. We've commissioned over 60 artists of a bunch of different styles and backgrounds, and Jerome has been with us from the beginning. They gave us some extra money this last year, and so I'm really excited to share some of the ways that that's showing up in the program for the coming year. Cool. So you'll be creating over 30 minutes of new music for the Cedar stage. We define new music as music that hasn't been previously written, composed, or recorded. There's a little bit of flexibility there, but generally, I want applicants to think of it as like a project that's completely new. It could be something that you've been working on like on your own for a while, but you haven't really shared it out with like a wider audience. I think that if you've had an idea for a long time that's just been kind of gestating, that can be a really good fit. People have also thought about like, what is something that's very different than what I typically do? And it might not be something they've been thinking about for a really long time, but it's something that's speaking to them in that moment. I think about that in terms of like Dua's application. Like, okay, like where can I find all of these different Afro-diasporic sounds? And it wasn't necessarily something they'd been thinking about for a while, but it was something that was like, this is what I want to be doing now. You'll perform it, you know, fingers crossed, for a live public audience in February 2023. And then you'll attend 5 different cohort meetings. Those are held each month at the Cedar. We did do one of the meetings virtually last year just because there was a huge surge. And so we decided to do that. And then you'll participate in a wrap-up meeting, just kind of telling us how the experience went at the end. So Cedar Commissions artists receive a, oh, I met this person. You receive $5,000 as a commission. Last year, this number was $4,000. And so we put 1,000 of the new dollars from Jerome into each artist's stipend. You'll have a $500 stipend that's to be used for various performance expenses. That might be like if you want to rent a hazer, if you want to rent like a specific HD projector or like a laser or something like that. Or if you need to rent like a specific mic that we don't have in-house. We have a lot of different mics that work for like, I'd say like 97% of instruments. But you might need to buy a mic for your Ethiopian karar. Like that's what Faise had to do a couple of years ago. And you can use that for performing or paying the performing artists as well. One of the things that I'm excited about this year is sometimes, or in past years, artists have had to decide whether or not they want to use 250 of that stipend for like a full-on tech rehearsal, like a full run-through. But for each artist for this next year, you'll have a built-in tech rehearsal that doesn't count against your funds. It's just built in for free. So that's part of what we use the budget for. You'll have administrative and marketing support from the Cedar staff. Shasa in the back is our lead comms and marketing person. So she'll be supporting folks this year. That includes like interviews, working to think about like, who is your audience? Who are the folks that are in your network? And how can you get the word out to them and then get beyond that? And then one of the other things that we put money into this year, this next year, is we're able to beef up the budget a little bit more for professional photos and video. In the past, we've usually only been able to offer more documentary film. And so that would be like a shot from the back of the room, you know, nothing edited in, none of the close like moving shots. And this year we'll have a bigger video budget. And so we'll have, it'll be more akin to like what you guys had with a couple different angles. And we were lucky this year for TPT to come on board. And so they filmed one of the nights, and then Free Truth Media, Ryan Stapera, filmed the second night. So those will be coming out, I think, midsummer. TPT is going to be airing that episode, I think, late July. Maybe it's August. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. I'm not quoting on that. Yeah, and then, yeah, like the photos that you see in the slideshow are ones that Buck shot for the night. So who's eligible? We like to keep it pretty broad in terms of like which genres. You know, it's like we're not really looking for a particular genre. I think one of the areas that's a little bit difficult to articulate is more improvisational music or like free-flowing music. And so what we want to see in that sense is some of the themes that you'd be focusing on, or some of the, you know, techniques or ideas, or you know, what type of framework you would be working within, because that type of improvisation, you know, just doesn't lend itself as well to like, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. It doesn't lend itself as well to like some of the other applications, some of the other ways that folks write applications. Yeah, you have to be an early career artist to be eligible. And so I guess the way that I think about that is like Kiss the Tiger in my book wouldn't be like an early career artist. It's like they've had like quite a bit of local success. You know, it's like they played like the Minnesota State Fairground stage. You know, they like opened for Daughtry. And so it's like that probably wouldn't qualify as emerging artist to me. But it's somebody who is like it's like you're taking your artist career seriously. Like if you've ever gotten paid for a gig, think of it that way. You know, it could be a bar gig, you know, or like could be like a pop-up market gig, but it's something that you want to be spending more of your time doing, you know, thinking about that vocationally. You do have to apply as a lead artist and not an ensemble. So some folks have reached out and said like, hey, like I'm part of this really awesome band. Like we would like to put forth a proposal. And so like the Cedar Commissions isn't really a great fit for that. It's more focused, like Jerome's big focus is developing individual artists, thinking about what an artist leading a project is. There, obviously, it's like you'll have your collaborators. Collaborators contribute, you know, on like a wide range of things. Like it could be like you writing all the parts and then your collaborators play them out. Or it could be like, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking about, you know, like these are just some loose melody lines, you know, this is kind of what I'm looking for. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, you can grab actually those two. And then you would be relying on your collaborators to kind of like draft it up with you as you go, as you jam. So there's flexibility there as well. The main idea is that you are like the creative director of the project. Over here, yeah, just those two. You do have to live in the state of Minnesota to be eligible, and then full-time degrees seeking students are not eligible for the Cedar Commissions. And then if you get a Cedar Commissions, you're not eligible for 2 years after that. So Tearra, I guess you could technically apply again if you wanted to.
I'm not emergent anymore.
Yeah, Tearra's on the up and up. Okay, so that's a little bit about like what the experience is. I didn't talk as much about the cohort meetings. I think that generally what folks have said to me is like that's some of the most valuable time, just in terms of talking with the other artists, and being able to workshop ideas, or like I'm getting stuck in my writing process. Like, do you guys have any, like, what do you think about spurring me onto a new idea? And I remember there was one brainstorming session where maybe it was you, Tearra, you were saying like, Sanaa, just like get some mood lights.
Yeah.
And so Sanaa did that, and like, I don't know, just like wrote a bunch before the next time. And I don't know, it's just like kind of like, that's a small example, but I know the group last year had a WhatsApp chat. And so they would text each other like, hey, this is a sample of what I'm working on. Can you let me know what you think? Yeah.
I think a lot of times too, you feel like you know all the questions in the beginning and you're like, I have an idea of what I want to do. And then as the process goes along, you have more questions, or you're like, is it okay if I shift a little bit or whatever? So that was really nice to just be able to talk to you and then with each other and see what kind of issues we have popping up, and just able to make sure we stay on track with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know, like, you know, for me facilitating, I always love just hearing what everybody has to say. So yeah, so what questions are popping up in terms of, oh, sorry. Okay, so finishing that, sorry, like my brain kind of goes all over the place. In terms of the meetings themselves, it's like they'll be focused on different topics. So like one of them, like a couple months before the show, will be like, okay, we're talking about all the tech involved. It's like, we need your stage plots. We need like what you're going to have in terms of like your instrument list at this point. Just like, we're going to talk with Chris, who's like our lead tech director, and he's going to be like, okay, like, this is the type of lighting that we can do well. You know, this is the type of thing that works well with the projector. Like you can use the house cam and stuff like that. And, so that's like one of the later meetings, and then you'll have like a marketing focused meeting with Shasa. And then there's like one meeting where we take artist headshots as well. Yeah, so those are some of the topics. And then there's one that's kind of like a free floating meeting that gets determined by the cohort, like what they most want to see. And then the other thing that I'll get into this later. I think you had a question.
Wondering the code that the composer and the writer collaborate on, like an opera, or like some people are like
to repeat the question just to make sure that I'm understanding the scope of it. So asking a question about, does one person have to be both the composer and like the writer of the lyrics, or like a lyricist? I think a stronger application would come from somebody who's looking at composing in that sense, focusing on the music side of it. But if you were a vocalist as a lead, you know, that'd be a very strong application as well. Just in terms of like, I'm writing the lyrics, I'm going to write the melodies, and you know, working with collaborators in terms of, you know, the chords and the instrumentation that comes underneath. It could work in either way, and you could also do it where it's like the lead artist is in charge of both of those things. That's a lot to bite off, but yeah, people have done that in the past.
So going back to what you were saying about like Jerome's main thing is trying to make sure it's like supporting emerging artists, like the one artist, so 6 of them. So that would be the stronger. But you can still get help, you know, that's what I did. I was like, okay, I had 6 or 7 different folks. We had different drummers or different, you know, bass players, and you tell them your ideas and then they can come up with some of the notes too, but it's like your ideas that are in the forefront of it.
Yeah, totally. There's some questions that came in from the chat, so I'm going to read some of those. We have one question that says, can you please say more about the artistic mentorship component? So there'll be some mentorship that happens in the meetings themselves. Tearra, no, I don't think Tearra was involved last year. Bio was for one of the meetings. Tearra was involved in like this meeting last year, but it happened on Zoom. You came in clutch. That was like really helpful. But there's a meeting with past Cedar Commissions artists where the current cohort gets to talk with people who were in the cohorts before and asking a lot of questions about just the process and, you know, what folks have done, how their projects have evolved. There also is usually a session where we'll bring in kind of like a more established artist who will listen to samples of the cohort and then give some feedback. Yeah, there's like one listening session where all the artists will like give feedback. You'll tell the other cohort members what type of feedback you're looking for, and then conversations will focus around that. And then in terms of, there's a $250 stipend for you to work privately with a mentor. And so the requirement is that you meet with them twice, at least twice, over the 6-month period. And so that can work a couple different ways. It can be somebody that you're already working with. It can be somebody that you're going to reach out to. Or it can be somebody you're like, hey, like, I'm not really sure who would be good at this. Like, do you guys know anyone? And so like we can connect you and facilitate that conversation to see if something might work out there. Yeah, those connections would either be with folks that we know just through the industry, people that we know who've performed here, local artists, or past Cedar Commissions artists as well. There's another question. They're saying they're not an early career artist as a singer or arranger, but a very early career artist as a performer or composer or independent performer of their own music. That still counts, right? Yeah, that's true. Quite a few applications come from like folks who've been part of a group, and their group may have experienced some success, but they're like, this isn't really what my individual vision is. And so their growth area is like, I'm stepping into like the lead role here. Devon, yes, musical comedy would apply. Things that you could do, or a musical as well. And then the specific criteria that will be used to evaluate and choose an applicant, we'll get into that a little bit later. Philip, did you do that, or it says Philip? Maybe there's another. Okay. Track. Cool. Any other questions from the folks here, just for the first part? Yeah, Cody.
your projector looks good. Some of my songs that I'm thinking of have landscapes and environments that inspire them. Would it be possible to hang any photography in the lobby?
Possibly. Probably if it's on the walls, you know, if it's not like a standalone easel. It's just the lobby space is so limited. But yeah, just making sure that there's enough pathways. Yeah. Yeah, Tree. It's a really interesting, that's a really interesting question. I've felt kind of both ways about it, just in terms of, it's like helpful on the artist side of things to have like content to be able to share out and be like, this is like a preview of what the performance is going to sound like. But then at the same time, the idea is that like, this is brand new music that like nobody's ever heard before. So I think I would encourage folks to, you know, share like a teaser, like maybe just a 15-second snippet, 30-second snippet, something like that, but not like a full recording, if you will.
I thought you were gonna say 10-second, like at the most. Yeah, I feel like that'd be super ambitious too, because like, I feel like you're down to the wire trying to get your show like set, but marketing's great too, so you can, or you can maybe show like video of you practicing and whether you want to have the audio or not. That's good. Good to think about.
Cool. All right, we'll hop to the next section. I think this will cover, oh, sorry, Shasa.
Play them out. The multiple.
Yeah, multiple instruments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a recommendation either way. The question is, as an emerging composer, I'm writing and playing multiple instruments. Is this helpful, or would it be best to stick with one? I don't have an answer to that question. You know, it's kind of like, I think it's what you think would be most effective, or like, what is the most compelling idea to you? I think a lot of people think about like, you know, what's going to be the best idea for the Cedar, you know, and it's like, certainly you want something that's going to feel like at home on the stage, you know. It's like, I don't know, like, it's interesting because it's like the stage can feel, or this room can feel good in like a variety of different settings. You know, it's like you can have experimental jazz here and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You can have electronic here and like, oh, that makes sense. You know, like drone at drones here, it's like, oh, that makes sense. You can have like Femi Kuti here and like, that also makes sense. Yeah, so I would encourage people to think about like, what is the most compelling idea for you? And then how can I best articulate that?
Yeah, so does the music have to be, has anyone ever done before a video game to be like a combination of playing something that you created for the performance, but like doing maybe like dance during part of it, and then having another part where you're actually playing an instrument or singing or like doing it live? Is it okay to have that combination, or do you expect the artist to be like performing part of the music the whole time?
That's a good question. So just for the people who are also on Zoom, I think the question, I just repeat it back, does the like lead artist have to be performing music the whole time? Can they perform as part of the first part? Can then they then dance? Can they then, you know, speak as part of it, and then go back to playing music? Or yeah, it can be any of that. We've had lead artists who haven't set foot on the stage until like the last part. They've been the composers, you know, and they come up at the end and say like, this is my work, like, thank you for listening. So, and then like V's performance last year, I don't know how many folks saw V Bohem's performance, but that was really like a multidisciplinary, a lot of dance involved with that, a lot of really tricky balance, and singing as well, and acting as well. So yeah. You're welcome. All right, we'll hop into this next section here. How do you apply? So submit the following to me by Friday, July 15th. Up to 2 pages or 3 minutes of video describing your project. Tell us about your project idea. Tell us about how feasible your project is and how this project will further your career as an emerging artist. All of this stuff is on like the call for artists. If you look at I think it's the 3rd page, it's all included there. So if you're wondering about like what the rubric is that like we're going to be using, it's like literally those questions. And then it's ranked from 1 to 5, like how well did the artist articulate what their vision was. Yeah. I'm gonna quick check my notes for this part, because this is the part that I just want to make sure. Okay, cool. So yes, all of this stuff is also included in the call for artists. What we really want to see is how are you pushing yourself as an artist? That can look different ways for different people. I've mentioned the example of people who were band leaders, and then they're like, or people who are like part of a band, part of a group vision, and they're like, I really want to try doing a solo thing that's totally different from my band work. There are people who have been a solo artist who really want to explore different instrumentation and different composition, and they're like, I don't know, there's like usually at least one person a year who's like a solo artist who then ends up with like a 13-person ensemble on stage, just like really like exploring like a much bigger sound. For some people, it's like thinking about, like you bring up the idea of dance as well. It's like, how can they fuse their identities as a dancer and as a composer together? Yeah, and for some people, that push involves like identity reflection. So some folks have done like delving into familial history and interviewing grandparents, interviewing parents, and then taking that material and like weaving it into different songs. Some of it is like a story arc of like a relative story. Other times it's like snapshots that are inspired by just some of the events that have come up in those discussions, that family history inquiry. Yeah, in terms of explaining why this work is artistically relevant, both personally and in a larger community, cultural, or societal context, we want to know both why like this work matters to you, but then also like where it situates itself, you know. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be like this wide engrossing, like I'm going to solve racism, like, because that's like not going to happen in 30 minutes of music or 6 months. We just want to see that like you're aware of like, you know, like for me, like if I was to like write a project, it'd be like talking about like I'm writing music for like mixed people, people who are mixed race, and it's like I'm really trying to dig into identities, both coming from like my more racially privileged side, like my white side, and then also traditional Filipino values and culture. And so saying, you know, this work is important because like there's not a lot of like Filipino mixed music out there right now. There's not a lot of that being put out there. And that's not true, you know, that stuff is being put out there. You know, like Dominic Fike is like one example. That's like Black Filipino, or like her, you know, as well. I think her is Black Filipino. Yeah.
I'm like, is she?
Huh?
Is she?
I think so. I'll look it up. We got to fact check me. Huh? Cool. So anyways, yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be like super like wide encompassing, but we just want a sense that like you're aware of like where this is situated within a larger context. If you articulate a project that's like, I'm really, really interested in like digging through these like tape archives and, you know, finding these samples and stitching them together and then sharing that with everybody. We'll be like, that sounds like a really awesome project, but like, why? You know?
Yeah.
And that sounds like it could be a really awesome project, you know? You just have to like take us along with that. You know, like where does it fit? How does it situate itself within everything else? One thing that's helpful to note is that like, I would recommend people not to think of this as like, this is like how I'm gonna like record my first album. This is primarily thinking about it on the creation of the music and thinking about that live performance. People will often record the album afterwards, you know, like Tearra. Prez came out, what, like a month ago?
End of April.
End of April, 2 months ago, month and a half. And so like people will do that afterwards, but if people like write to us and say like, hey, like I really want this, I really want to use this to like record my first album, it's like that's not going to fare very well. We want to hear more about what you envision in the live space. Like, what do you envision for this live experience for people? And then, yeah, just like thinking about like, okay, like, you know, what do you envision on the screen? You know, like, what do you envision as the experience for that audience member? And you don't have to have everything fleshed out in the proposal itself. We just want to, we want to hear your strongest idea for what that live performance is going to be.
Which makes sense because it's like the Cedar, you know, it's like what is going to be on the Cedar stage.
Mm-hmm. And so like one of the things that I would recommend is like if you, I'm assuming that most folks have been to a show here at the Cedar, probably multiple shows, but if you haven't, like definitely come down and check out a show, see what it feels like in the space, and that'll give you a better sense for, you know, what might work here, what might work well here. And then one of the other things to note is like, I gave the example of like Faisa buying instrument for her kara, for her performance. That's totally fine. You know, it's like, if this is the equipment that you need to like make this happen, it's like, do it. But if your proposal says like, I'm using 4,000 of these dollars to buy myself like a Nord Electro 4, like, we're going to be like, this is not the right grant for that, you know, because you're like not going to have enough money left over for yourself, like to pay other performers. That's more of a, I'm trying to remember what, I don't remember which grant locally is more towards like getting gear to kind of like take you to the next level.
MRAC.
Is that the next step?
The Next Step Fund. Yeah, you can do that.
What did you say?
MRAC's Next Step Fund. It's Metro Regional Arts Council. So you can use that for like, if you want to tour, if you want to buy equipment. But yeah, like you said, it's like it's for the live performance and you want to be able to give yourself time to write the new stuff too. So.
Yeah. And obviously it's like, if you include, and you should include money for yourself, either to, you know, take time off of work, pay yourself for the labor that you're doing. You know, it's like if you pay yourself, you know, $2,000 for it, and then you like go buy, you know, the $2,000 synth that you've been wanting, it's like, that's fine, you know, but just shy away from, you know, thinking about that as like the main focus of the proposal. You know, people make money, you spend the money however you want. Yeah, go ahead, Judy.
I have more different questions related to application actually. Do we need to do like audio instead of video, or would there be a difference that is?
Yeah, in terms of the proposal, or in terms of like your sample? Yes, yeah, you could do audio if you wanted. Yeah. Both a video and written. No, it has to be one or the other. Yeah.
I will say I wanted to do video and then I felt like I could get more out with the writing. So I just did the 2 pages. It's my experience.
Let's hop over here. In terms of including like a rough timeline and a budget, this doesn't have to be like super dialed out. We just want to, understand from you that you've thought about like, okay, I want to be spending this much time during these windows. And this is how I'm like paying myself. And then this is how much I'm paying my collaborators. And this is like, you know, I'm thinking that for my swamp project, I really want to have a hazer here. And so like, I think this is probably how much that is going to cost. If you can articulate that to us, it's like, we're like, great, they've got a good plan. Like they'll be able to figure it out. Yeah. And like being able to share, like, you know, in September, I'm planning to do this thing. Like in September, I'm planning to visit these like wildlife refuges. In like October, I'm going to go through all of the audio that I recorded in those wildlife refuges and like distill some ideas. In November, I'm going to compose some stuff based on that. In December, I'm going to meet with like my collaborators and we're going to jam on some of those ideas. And then I'm going to like hammer out what I think this piece is going to be. And then January to February is like prep time. You know, that's an example of how that like planning, that rough timeline can look like. Yeah.
Is it so? If I were to do something like a mini play / concert or something like, can you hire like people to play stuff in the background that don't but aren't there? Can you do that?
So like hiring somebody on Fiverr to do the track.
Right, like say if I need interlude music, I didn't want to just have a whole orchestra up there just for like.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, you could definitely do that. I think the things that I would encourage you to think about is like, if you're having a track play, like, how does that feel in the space for like an audience member? And if it feels like it's compelling, you know, do it. Yeah, trying to think about like how that fits in. If you feel like the live, you know, having like a live stream trio or something like that would be like, oh, like people are going to feel that more. I don't know. It's up to you. You got to articulate the vision. These are good questions. So yeah, I mean, this is just like a sample budget. It doesn't, you know, it's like, this isn't like broken down into like, you know, we're going to work this many hours on this, you know, it's like, this is the rate. You can go as granular as that if you want to. Sometimes people have submitted proposals where they're like, we're paying each musician like X dollars an hour. It's like, I'm paying myself X dollars an hour. And then that makes up for all of these. Things to think about in terms of your budget, paying your collaborators, finding rehearsal space, and how much that's going to cost you. Maybe it's your basement, so it's free. Maybe you're renting a studio, and so factoring that in as part of the budget for the Cedar Commissions. And then, yeah, really reiterating paying yourself for that work time, your time as a composer, your time as an artist. I talked a little bit about this earlier. Cedar Commissions can be a really fruitful place for people to go from like one area of their career into another area of their career. Just kind of like trying to take things up to like the next level. I saw this happen for, I think, each of the artists last year. Two of the examples that stuck with me were V. Bohem. She was working on a piece called The Edge, where she was articulating, trying to share like being on like the total edge of like your emotional capacity and your mental capacity and like what that's like. And it was so moving. It was just like, there were so many different emotions and like musical styles encapsulated with that. And her idea was like, she wanted to prototype this piece where she was standing on a structure in the middle of the room and performing with like a headset mic and trying to like do a headstand on the module in the center as well while she's continuing to sing, because she wanted to push herself to the edge. And she also was like wearing stiletto heels and like balancing on like the middle of the box. It's going to be cool. Like check it out on TPT. But yeah, anyways, it's like for her, it's like, she's like, I've been wanting to do this idea. And like, this is the spot for me to like prototype this ask the questions about like, where do the speakers have to be in order for like the mic not to feedback? Like, how can I make this pedestal in a way that like would collapse down and fit in the back of a car? Because she wants to take it on the road as well. So that was like something that took her from like one area to like the next area. And then with Carlisle Evans Peck, for their performance, I was like, I just saw them combine kind of all of the different elements of a live performance into one thing. And Tearra, you did that as well, you know, dance, music, and then like the visuals that would have been like projected for a live audience, but were interspersed in the middle of the video. But yeah, thinking about all those different elements of the lighting, like candles on stage, like stage decoration, like stuff that's projected on the screen and movement in the background, all the performers interacting together, and Carlisle embodying these different characters and doing all these different costume changes between songs, embodying different family members. Yeah, that was just something where I saw them, you know, these were all things that they'd done before in different aspects, but it was like bringing all of those together in a really meaningful way. It was really cool. Yeah, and so if you can articulate like where this project is going to help you go as an artist, I don't know, something that I've wanted to work on is like, I'm a drummer and also a keyboard player, and I've found a lot of like meaning in trying to like figure out how to play percussively with like synths and keys and stuff like that, you know, like how do you meld kind of like both of those two. So, you know, if I were to write a proposal, like this wouldn't be that compelling of an idea to me. I guess we're our own harshest critics, but, you know, articulating that like, you know, I've never combined these things before, but like combining these things is something that I want to do. And like, here's what is going to be the result of that. And, you know, these applications are like, you know, what, it's like 2 pages, 3 minutes of video. So it's not a lot of time to fit in everything. But I do realize that we're asking a lot of people for these applications in terms of like being concise, sharing your project ideas. But I do think based on the applications that I've seen, like it's achievable to do that within the span of those pages. Let's see. I bring up these artists as examples of kind of like the pushes or the stretches. So I brought up City Councilor as like, usually was a solo artist. They were one of the artists that was like, okay, I'm going to work with 13 different musicians, expanding instrumentation. Alicia Tao spent time interviewing her parents about their immigration journey to Oklahoma and rediscovering some of that family history. And so then she wrote songs based on that. And it was actually really awesome. She had her mom open the night with a traditional Hmong song, just her singing on stage. It was really powerful. Anat Spiegel, I think researched, it was either 3 or 4 different women who created various different art during World War II. I think it was either in concentration camps or folks who were like in Nazi occupied Germany. And then she created art based on that research.
Wow.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, and then I gave the example of B as well. Some of these artists' performances are up online. Some of them aren't. Most of them are. So if you're looking for like inspiration, I would definitely recommend checking out the 2021 year that Tearra was in. I think, you know, a lot of the projects that came before, very compelling, but the video doesn't quite do it, you know. And so like with Tearra's year, we were able to work with Ryan. And I think that'll give you a sense of kind of like what's possible. Okay. Yeah, I don't know that I have that much to say in terms of describing your artistry. I would say think about the things that feel like they're the most important to this project Like maybe it might not be as important to share that like I took Suzuki lessons when I was like 4 years old on piano, unless that's like central to my project, you know. It's like I could just say like I started playing piano at the age of 4 and like, you know, I've played it for, I don't know, the last 25 years of my life, without going into like every single teacher, you know, just figure out like what information is the most pertinent to share. With that, it's like I would definitely encourage folks, if you have the time and you get it ready ahead of time, have like one of your friends read it. Having somebody else read like an application that you wrote is really helpful for understanding like what is getting communicated and like what's getting lost.
Tell them to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is not like just to be nice, like let me know the truth. With anything, I would say that with your music too. Like it's always good to have another opinion on what you're doing. Even though your opinion matters the most, but it's good to see.
For the audio and video work samples, it's best if you can chop it down so that it actually is no more than 5 minutes in length. You can send us like a link and say, hey, listen to like, you know, 15 seconds in, started at 15 seconds in, ended at like 3 minutes and 15 seconds, and then like go to this other link and like start at like, you know, 4 minutes and 47 seconds. But if there's a way that you can chop it up and it's just those 5 minutes, that works a lot better on our end. In terms of those audio and video work samples, it's like it should represent your musicality and capability as an artist. I wouldn't necessarily think about like it needs to be like the highest quality. As a like evaluating committee, it's like we recognize that people have different access to different things, and so I want people to think about like, does this sample communicate? Does it communicate what I'm capable of? And it doesn't necessarily have to be like pristine, like HD audio and video. We do ask people to note your role in the work sample. So like, if you were playing guitar, I don't know, just like I composed the piece, you know, it's like I wrote the piece, I played guitar and I sang lead vocals. Just tell us that. In terms of how artists are chosen, they're selected through a review process. Typically, there's like 4 or 5 different review panelists. Those are folks from the local Twin Cities music scene, people who are past Cedar Commissions artists. I've been on the selection panel the last 3 years. And then we usually have a member from our access team, and they're the team that works on accessibility at the Cedar. In all sorts of different spaces. The 4 criteria are project idea, feasibility, emerging artist, and then work samples. All of these questions are included in that call for artists. So I'm not going to go into each of these. That's something that I think is probably better done on folks' own time. In terms of like the deliberation process itself, it's like each of the panelists will receive everybody's applications. They'll have 2 weeks to go through everybody's applications and take notes. And then we'll meet for like anywhere between 5 to like 7 hours with breaks in between over lunch, dinner and stuff. And like go through one by one and say like, okay, you know, it's like this person ranked high for 2 of the panelists, but then like low for 2 of the panelists. Like, let's talk about that. At the end of that, then we will select 6 lead artists and then 3 alternates, I think, just in case a project ends up not being eligible for like one reason or another, in case somebody has some sort of extenuating circumstance where they aren't able to do the commission. It's something where like I really try to respect what the committee wants. Like I I don't see it as like a shell committee where it's like, oh, like you guys decided that you wanted these artists, but like actually like the Cedar wants these artists. You know, it's like the artists that we all vote on and decide as a group is like who gets picked. So we will announce the cohort members publicly. I think it's August 15th. And then those who are selected will be notified if they've received a commission no later than August 9th. We'll provide feedback on applications as desired. This is subject to staffing capacity. Like last year was a little crazy. And so I apologize to everybody who like asked for feedback last year. It's just like, I was not able to give that to you. But I think we're heading into a more stable zone. So yeah, and I think, yeah, that gets us to the next Q&A session. Yeah. Let's do it. Yeah.
So I got two. First one, I think you said that there was maybe a place online we could see the past projects, but you just need for there is to do so after that.
Yeah, just in terms of seeing where seeing videos of the past projects. So not necessarily like past applications. Yeah, if you go on our YouTube channel, you'll be able to go to I don't remember if we have a Cedar Commissions playlist or not, but you'll be able to see those in the recent videos. They're all labeled with like Cedar Commissions in the year. So.
And then the next question, so is there three alternates? What does that mean to be an alternate? And especially in so maybe if you know obviously you are doing about 5 and 6 and you make a full one or whatever. It would be the same thing now. If you're an alternate, what does that mean?
So usually alternates are kind of on deck for kind of like the first month of the program. We did have somebody who had to drop out, I think maybe like 3 months into the program, and somebody else hopped in. Yeah, I mean, in the situation that an artist has to drop out and is no longer able to participate in the program, then they would send the money back to us, and that money would then go to like the alternate artist. There isn't much for the alternate artist to do in the meantime. Yeah, there isn't like an expectation that they would be like an understudy and like working alongside the cohort artists on their projects, just like waiting for that call. Like it's most of the time it's just kind of thinking about that first month. Yeah. Oh yes. So the question was the first question was.
I was like, wow, you have a good memory.
The first question was, where would you find the performances online? That's on YouTube. Second question was alternates. Yeah, what do alternates do? What are alternates responsible for in the grant period? Yeah. I'm going to take one of the questions here. One of the questions says, can you give us an example of something that would be too ambitious of a project or vice versa, like something that would not necessarily qualify as like a push for an artist? I think something that would be too ambitious, that ended up being too ambitious, was Bia wanted to create a full visual album and have like video, like a music video for each of the like half-hour plus worth of music. And that just ended up being like way too much for the 6 months.
I mean, maybe if it wasn't COVID, maybe.
Possibly.
But yeah.
Yeah, the COVID factor really like throws a wrench in things, can throw a wrench in things. Yeah, in terms of like something that would probably be too ambitious, it's like if you wanted to write like a full rock opera with like 2 movements and 20 songs, it's probably not going to happen. You know, I think about this as like it's like obviously it's like at the end of those 6 months, it's like you want something that you're going to be able to perform in front of an audience that you're proud of and that like can stand on its own and hold its own in front of a crowd in the midst of the other cohort of artists, something that you're excited to share. But also it can definitely be like, this is like a prototype, you know, like this is like the coalescing of my ideas towards this. And I know that I'm going to work on it more in the future. Don't feel like you have to like get everything done within this time frame. Like if you said like, I really want to write 12 different songs, you know, one for each month of the year, and you only got through 8 of them, it's like, that would be okay. You know, it's like you weren't able to get to those last 12, and then just articulating with like where you were in the process, as long as that didn't like mess up your whole program. There's a lot of flexibility involved in terms of like what's coming to the surface for you as an artist, and where that grant period takes you. And then in terms of like other things that would be too ambitious, if you were somebody who had never played a musical instrument before, and you're like, I want to take this time to learn how to play the piano, and you don't have any other prior like instrumental experience, it's like that would be too ambitious for the scope of those 6 months. If you're somebody who was like a guitarist, let's say you were a guitarist who like, it's like, I only know how to like read music, but I don't know how to improvise. You're like, I'm going to use like the first 3 months of my grant program to learn how to improvise more. Like that would be feasible, because it's like you already have a lot of technical expertise, but it's like using that in a different way, and like vice versa. You know, if you wanted to spend time like reading more music, or like reading more music so that you could like write out the different parts that you wanted to, that would be feasible. But yeah, like learning a totally new instrument that's too ambitious for the scope of this. Really, like the Cedar Commissions can be this container for you to dig into an area that you've wanted to, or that's rising to the surface for you. Yeah, I would think of it less as like a skill development grant, and more of like pushing your artistry in a different way. And certainly there are skills that do get developed along the way. But if you're thinking of it as like, I don't know, that's one of the like kind of tricky middle areas, you know, because like there are certainly Cedar Commissions artists who've had a lot of success being like, yeah, I'd never produced my own tracks, but like I spent time like producing my own tracks because of COVID, you know, and that ended up being really successful as well. So I don't know. Yeah,
That's where the
it's a
samples
great
come in,
area.
your work samples.
Mhm.
I would say too, like you were saying, to keep your mind on the fact that it's a live show, but also that it's going to be 30 minutes. So I know for me, like I ended up recording like scratch tracks of what I was going to do to time it out, and then think like, okay, I'm going to talk maybe 3 minutes or 5 minutes, and really see like how much time that's going to be. That could be really helpful to think about it like that too.
Is it exactly 30 minutes? So what does it?
You turn the lights on, you get taken off the stage. No, yeah, there's wiggle room. It's like 30 plus, you know, and like some people have taken liberties with that, and it's like a full 65 minutes, you know, but like if you're like 30 to 45 minutes, that's great, you know. Yeah. I'm gonna quick check one more of these questions. So I guess an example of something that might not be ambitious enough. I guess one of the questions to ask yourself is like, have I done this before? Like, what is this funding doing that like isn't something that I could do on my own? You know, like what is this funding helping me do? It's not something that I could do on my own. Like I know for AJ 2 years ago, it was like working with members of the Minnesota Orchestra, and so they were off for the most part because of COVID, but she was able to work with them as her collaborators because of that funding. And so, yeah, just thinking about like, you know, if it's something that like you could do again, it's like, might not be the most compelling idea for Cedar Commissions, but if it's something where it's like, this is really going to help me achieve something new, something that I couldn't do without this, that's a more compelling answer. Let me see. And then I think the last question here is, Yeah, for the transcript, if you do record a video as your application, and this is not thinking of the video as the like audio samples or your work samples. In terms of including a transcript, if you include like an outline, that's helpful. Like that's enough for what we need. You don't have to do like a word for word transcript. All right. I can't remember who.
I would like to just know if, so I might different styles in my music, and I would like to be able to show everything that we come together.
Mhm.
But not all of the styles are present in each side of it. So I would have to kind of pull around from different places. Is it okay to create something that isn't a work sample that's specific for this, that's kind of opposite of different tracks together, or do you want to have like just these are free songs, or okay, kind of like take clips and make something that meets the five requirement that they gives you
Yeah, so we have a question from audience here about the work samples and whether to like chop a bunch of different songs together into a sample to show elements of the styles that might be included in the final product. The work samples should really be like two distinct like samples. And so what I would encourage people to think about is it doesn't necessarily have to be a prototype of what you're planning to do. Like I wouldn't think of the work samples that way. But it should demonstrate that you're able to do what you're proposing. Does that make sense? It's like you should be able to show in that work sample that it's like if my project was to combine piano and drum influences into some sort of fusion. I'm just using that as an example. I feel embarrassed about it. Then I would want to include tracks of me playing piano and being like, this is what I've composed for the piano, and then tracks of me playing drum set, like this is what I've composed for trap set.
So say if you're going to compete like say you're a musician, then you already have a compete with your application, or the music where they have musicians add your application.
So the question was like, if you're working with a bigger ensemble, is it more helpful to name the musicians in the application? Like, do you have to, or is it okay to say like, I'm working with these instruments. I'm going to find the musicians later. I think it's usually stronger if you can say like, these are like the people that I'm planning to work with, like there's flexibility there. But then that demonstrates to us that it's like, okay, like they know people, it's not like, if they're like, I really want to work with a harpist, I'll be like, okay, like, I think I know like one harpist in the Twin Cities. There might be just like a ton of harpists that I don't know, probably are. But then like on the reviewing side of things, we're like, is this person going to be able to like find, like if you said like, I want to work with a harpist, I want to work with a hammered dulcimer player, I want to work with like, I don't know, just like a lot of different kind of like niche instruments, and you didn't like label those people, we'd be like I'm not seeing in this person's application in like their artist background and like what groups they've been a part of, or like what communities they've been a part of. I'm not necessarily seeing that they would know somebody who like does this. So I'd say it's probably more effective to include artist names, people that you're planning to collaborate with. But, at the same time, if you can show us that like, you're connected to circles of people where like you would be able to, find musicians, find a bassist, find a drummer, find folks that would be able to fill those roles, like that's basically what we want to see in terms of feasibility. Tearra, I feel like I have some questions for you.
Yeah, I was gonna say too really quick, that 6 months, it kind of sounds like a lot of time, but it's like so much not. So I think that kind of goes with what you asked. It's like, how much time are you gonna spend to like figure out these things that we hope that maybe you would come to the table with already. Yeah. Anyways.
Hearing the word, I don't know, what's the difference between the word sample and the application we do?
So for the application itself,
Yeah.
you can either write up a 2-page document, like send that to us, along with your audio samples or your work samples, that's a video. And that would be like,
So your project
like your
idea.
songs, yeah.
The work
But
sample
then-
and the project idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then the thing that is a little bit tricky, where I think this question is coming from, is like, you can record a video of yourself talking about your project as your like application, and that would take the place of the 2-page written document. So you can do it in like either format. I've seen successful applications in both.
I
People
just
who've
thought about
done
that.
it.
You would probably want people to say their project idea as opposed to like adding in another work sample kind of like what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the applicant, you know. It's like there's certain applications that are just so strong written, you know, and then the other applications that are like a lot more powerful, that verbal delivery, and you know, vice versa.
Yeah.
You know.
Give them a-
Tearra, I wanted to ask you, where were you in your trajectory as an artist when you did the Cedar Commissions?
Yeah, when I saw the Cedar Commissions, I had grown up doing traditional Afro-Puerto Rican music, and all of the songs were in Spanish. And so that was very different from this other music that I did, where I wrote like pop, R&B, kind of funk music. And at that time, I had already done some shows like at Ice House or the Nomad, or kind of did some other stuff actually overseas, but it wasn't a marriage of those two things. So I was like, oh, I have these songs that I play and that I'm singing in English that I like, but I also really like bomba and these rhythms. And whenever I do shows, I'm like half this and half that. And I want to take the time to put them together and write songs in English and Spanish. And I'm using these rhythms for all of the songs and putting that R&B funk instrumentation in there. So yeah, I already had experience performing and writing and playing the rhythms. So I felt confident in my ability to perform, but just hadn't had the chance to meld those two genres together. So that's where I was at with it. And then I already knew a lot of folks. I knew all the folks that I did the show with, and I think I put on there that I knew pretty much everybody who I wanted to be a part of it. So yeah, people I'd played with, but not the R&B funk stuff. So
could you tell us a little bit about what your process was like during the commissions and how your idea developed? Did it change? Did it stay the same?
yeah. And like I said too, it was really helpful actually after I talked to my mentor. He was like, just record it. And then I was like, oh yeah, especially for COVID, like we're not going to be practicing enough together. So why don't I just record everything, have scratch tracks, and let everybody listen to it before we get together, so people have a chance to practice and hear how long things are going to be in the order of things. And then that helped me feel better about, okay, this is how long it's going to be, or I want to add something, or I need another song, or I don't, you know. So that was really helpful to do that. And then, and I want to say too, like there was more instrumentation that I wanted to add in there that I didn't have the time to necessarily. But again, this is really about that creation and the writing. And so I was able to later on be like, okay, I want to record this and not take the 6 months that I'm focusing on the live show and like add on to it later. So yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah.
And you know, like we said, I was the 2020 year, so it was like straight in COVID, and that was really difficult too, because I think one of the sample budgets said that we can use some of the funds for like childcare. And so I figured, I had a 1-year-old, he's about to be 3 now, and I was like, oh, I'll be able to have help with him so I can like actually write and stuff. and I couldn't really have help with him because it was COVID. So I'm like writing when I can and whispering into my phone when he's asleep, and so that was kind of stressful. But yeah, whenever you can just record little ideas and then come back to it, that can really help too. Yeah, just use that technology when you can to grow your ideas. And I think what other people had said too, it's really helpful to like just try to get things down and make sure folks have enough time to rehearse. You don't want to feel stressed about like putting on this awesome show and not having enough time to make sure you know your transitions and everybody knows like the notes that they're going to play,
That kind of leads into the next question. Like, when did you finish, or when did you feel like you finished writing kind of like the work?
I wonder if it was December, and then we recorded in February. Yeah, I think I finished writing everything in December. I can't remember if it was before I found out that I got the gig or not. That I just came up with my first song writing about Philando, but it's like, as soon as you can, like get it going, get any lyrics, any ideas. And then, yeah, so I guess it took me like 4 months at least to get it all down. And then, it sounds like a lot of folks are interested in like dance pieces too, and acting and that kind of thing. So that takes time too. So if you can get like the meat of it down in 4 months and have 2 to figure out your transitions and add other things. I ended up adding 2, we talked about how I added like 2 kind of snippets in there that I had my son with me that I recorded. So those were like extra pieces that I was like, am I going to say this on stage? I'm like, it's a lot and I want to make sure it's right. So I ended up adding that later, but yeah, the meat of it took about 4 months. And even that felt like it's not enough time. So.
Yeah, I have a question for you. So for the whole concept of your project, was that something that you've been wanting to do for years, for a while at that point? Or was it like, okay, what are we going to do? I'll just kind of pick this and run with it for this specific.
Definitely.
Like, sort of just kind of love it, or was it like,
Yeah.
you just the opportunity to do this thing that I wanted to do for a while?
Yeah. So we're talking about if I had thought about this idea before, or if for years, or if I, kind of wanted to do it when the Cedar came about. I had definitely thought about melding those two, melding the rhythms with the new age, like R&B funk kind of stuff. But it's really the funds to be able to do it. And then also just the inspiration of even the questions, like what the questions are on there, answering those, I feel like really helps you to like make sure your project is going to be impactful. And especially for me as like a new mom, it wasn't on my like top priority to produce a show. But then when I was like, if I could have funds though, and then I can make sure that I can spend some time doing this, and it sounds so fun and I really want to. So yeah, at the time, if it wasn't for the Cedar grant, I probably wouldn't have. So I'm super grateful that I was able to.
I'm grateful you were too. This is a question that comes up a lot. What things did you use your budget for as an artist?
Yeah, I would say about half of it I used to pay other folks. I think I had 7 other folks with me. So that felt really good to think about, okay, I'm asking people to come and spend X amount of hours. So half of it really went to that, and then a chunk to me. And really, like you said, it's like we're thinking about how many hours we're spending on writing, and then you're also, or like writing lyrics, and then you're composing too. So you can really think about that. Like, I am taking these hours to create this music, and so I get to have half of it, so. And then for my year, we had a separate stipend for our mentors. So I was able to like use that for that. So yeah, it's about half and half.
Let's see. Being where you are now, what advice would you give to future applicants?
I would say Actually, I was thinking this earlier too. You know, this grant is super inspiring, right? Like we're all here, we're taking our time to think about this. It's because we want to make a difference. It's not like I want to be cool, I want to be on the stage. It's like I want to make some cool stuff. And so I would say if you get the grant or not, I would take that inspiration and do something with it, whether you're an alternate or not. Like I know it's not as easy when you don't have the funds, but even just to write, that's going to transform your stuff. That's going to help other people. You never know what lyrics can come out of you that can change your life, that can change somebody else's life. So, you know, it's like Minnesota has, it's really cool that Minnesota has funds to be able to help artists do that. So might as well at least use this time and all of this to push us forward, whether we get the funds or not. And then too, like I said, it wasn't like my show wasn't as perfect as I would have liked it, but I was still super proud of it. And I was able to like have this base for this album that I just put out. So I ended up writing 3 more tracks and adding more production on my songs. So I just look at it as this like stepping stone, really. It was like that first step of this new thing that I got to do. So it's not like this is the end all be all, or like I'm gonna do the same show every time. It's like, okay, this is a half hour, and then who knows, maybe in a year you're going to be able to use half of those songs, and then you're going to have another half that you wrote that you're still getting better and better at what you do, and you're just like growing what you do. I mean, you think about your favorite artists and it's like, do I just like their first album? No, like you like a lot of what they do, so you can really take what you do here and build on it. You can transform the songs that you started with or build more. So yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Tearra.
Yeah.
Just to echo what you were saying as well, it's like if your application is not picked, it does not mean that your idea is bad, you know? And so, yeah, just like trying to figure out ways, you know, it's like obviously without the funding, it's more difficult. But yeah, I really don't want people to think like because their proposal was not picked, it's like their idea is bad. It's like you had a good idea, you know, a lot of people had a good idea, you know, depending on the year, it's somewhere between, you know, I think at the lowest, it's like maybe 40 applications from people. And then at the highest, it's like 80 or 90. So if you think of like 6 people out of that, it's like on the low end, it's like maybe 1 out of 7 chance. On the high end, it's like, I don't know what that is. 1 out of 15, you know, maybe that's what it is. And so, but like, I'm always really grateful to like read people's applications because people do like the most successful applications, like people really go in and, you know, they find something that they're really passionate about and they're able to articulate why that matters to them and why that matters in a larger sense as well. Yeah.
We were talking about
Contextualize.
algorithms earlier, and you know, like we are in this technology age too. So whether you get it or not, like always be creating. If you want to put yourself out there, like create and put it out. Whether you're getting paid or not, you're probably gonna get paid if you keep doing it. So you can do it for songs, you can just do it for whatever you're doing, and you want to inspire people. Like we have technology, and it's really cool that we can virtually for free put ourselves out there, whether it's music or not. So I would think about that too. And then I don't know if merch is like a situation that could happen.
Yeah, you can definitely sell merch. I would say usually like people are not usually in a place with their projects to have like recorded it and like ready to sell as a CD.
Yeah.
Like most of the time audience members are like, so can I buy that right now? And like most of the time performers are like I still need to record it.
Or I'm even thinking of like shirts or like
Yeah.
pins or something. I don't know. I didn't have the time to do that, but I think if I could have, that would have been really cool to have. And then if you have people here already, it's like maybe make some money doing that.
Or if you have like CDs from like that you've already made too, it's like feel free to bring those with.
Cool.
You had people who use this commissions as a jumping point for like Kickstarter
Hmm.
for a project.
So like using this kind of as like seed funds for like a bigger, like,
Hey, what if you pay for more of this?
Hmm.
You know?
Mhm. I think you could think of it that way. I think probably the most effective way that I would see that happening is like having your performance, and then like, you know, and this is part of, oh, one of the other things that I forgot, it's like each artist in the past years, like artists have been able to choose whether or not they want to pay for like a multi-track recording from the board. And so that'll just be covered. Like we'll cover that on our side. And so each artist will get a multi-track recording. You'll be able to mix it and master it afterwards. Like we won't put in that time, but you'll be able to do with it what you want. And so the idea, and getting back to your point, Philip, it's like you'll have video of it, you'll have photography of it, you'll have audio of it. And so it's like being able to put that somewhere and say like, you know, this is what I've done already. It's like, can you help me take this to the next step? You know, like flesh this out as like a studio album. That's kind of where I see that piece coming in, you know. I don't know, it's just like, I think that those types of assets are so important for getting future opportunities, whether that's future grants or, you know, getting booked places. It's like having that type of, those type of assets is just huge. So.
I have a question. I'm not sure I'd like to ask it, but back to the question asked earlier about oh yeah, knowing the people that you're bringing on. Like my thing, the genre that I'm doing, and I kind of like the demographic I want to reach. To say like BIPOC punks, like I don't know about an existing array of people out there. I mean, at an intermediate level of their skill set, right? If there's like people who can like pick up an instrument and be like, yeah. But I mean, would it be bad if I'm trying to use this to like reach out to like put a call out for people like that to and I like I don't know, I'm still trying to figure out like, you know, that Normal Boy concert? Yeah. I emailed Julian and I asked him like, what about like BIPOC artists or drop playing with them? He said, perform with whomever, like you just gotta get your craft up. But I'm like, if this is a space for me to like explore something I won't have otherwise access to, that I want to explore playing with musicians who play this genre who are of this race experiences, maybe get more specific like Southeast Asians who play this. And I'm like, oh, would it be a conflict of interest to reach out to the drum? Which is a somewhat facetious, but I might ask you about that privately. But I don't know if you have thoughts around that.
Yeah, about the second part of the question, it's like, I don't know if I recorded on Bia's album, but that was well after her Cedar Commissions project was over. Yeah, I'd say I probably would not be able to be involved in anybody's like project applications, because that would be a conflict of interest since I'm on like the selection panel as well. But I think I would pose the question to you, like, do you think it would be more compelling for somebody to read, this person is going to use this money to like reach out to figure out who the BIPOC punks are in this area and then create with them something? Or would it be more compelling to hear like this person has identified a couple of different people that they might work with, and you know, this is kind of the ethos of this project, and I can see that like they've already established some of these connections, some of this direction. I think that's up to you in terms of deciding what would be the more compelling project. To me, I would lean towards the latter, just in terms of like focusing more on the artistic direction of it versus like the logistical process of it. If that makes sense. I think like doing that legwork ahead of time would probably make for a more compelling application.
Still early.
Yeah.
You can get on it.
Finding these people in my whole life in the Midwest, of all places, I don't know. It's a genre, racial group, or whatever.
We can talk after too. Yeah, I'll be here for a little while. I'm happy to answer any questions over here off to the side. I do want to say thank you to everybody for coming out here. Thank you to Tearra for coming through. Thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you, man. You holding it down up here, Robert.
I'm happy to be here. Yeah. And I want to say thank you to everybody who is out in the Zoomiverse over there. Thanks for tuning in.